All right, we're just going to give it a couple of seconds for people to be joining. Thank you so much for coming to today's webinar. I'm really excited to have our panelists with us today, and we'll get to intros in just a minute. If we haven't met before, I'm Katie, Director of Community at WISE, and together we're a global community dedicated to empowering the next generation of women in sales. Huge thanks to our partners for making events like this possible, and special thanks to AlphaSense and ComplyAdvantage for lending us the panelists on screen with me today. If you've pivoted at any point in your career or you just enjoy diversifying your responsibilities, today's topic is for you. We're discussing the value that can come from building a nonlinear career path and how to connect those dots externally in role exploration. So joining me in that conversation is Danielle Stefanello, Head of Sales Enablement and Chief of Staff to the President and CRO at AlphaSense, and Aaron Pugh, VP of Partnerships at ComplyAdvantage. So I will hand it over to you first, Danielle, to tell us a little more about yourself.
Of course, my title is a mouthful, but I'm Danielle Stefanello. I'm a New Yorker. I live in Philadelphia now with my husband and my 1.5-year-old puppy. I am a late tech bloomer. I didn't get into tech until 5 years ago. I spent most of my career working in fashion, real estate, services, industrial supplies. And I'm an extremely firm believer in your strength zone, and I'm very lucky to be in my dream job, where my talent and my passion like really collide. So excited to talk about that today.
Wonderful. And Aaron?
Yeah, so I'm Aaron Pugh. I'm Vice President of Partnerships at ComplyAdvantage. I am from Durham, North Carolina, or from the region in North Carolina. I love how Danielle started with that. I'm a New Yorker, first and foremost. So yeah, also very passionate about our Durham RDU area down here. But yeah, so I've had quite the windy career path. Started off studying sports and entertainment management, pivoted into tech, and then ultimately into cybersecurity. So most of my career I actually spent at Google. Went through a bunch of different roles there, everything from ads to Google X, the Moonshot division, to then later leading the commercial side of all of the fraud prevention teams within Google Cloud. So once I pivoted then and ended up in the Gen AI space, and then after another pivot, ended up in more of the compliance space. So really excited to share a couple insights and ways that I've messed up or gotten great advice from others. So thank you.
Amazing. Well, we're going to talk about some of those areas where they were successful and some of the mess ups, because we can all learn from those too. Throughout the conversation, throw where you're tuning in from in the chat. Also, there is a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We will have around 10 minutes or so at the end to get to that Q&A, so throw those in throughout as well. And we'll go ahead and jump in. It looks like the chat is working today, which is fantastic. People are tuning in across the US, which is great. So this first question for you, we'll start with you, Aaron. Throughout the conversation, like I mentioned before, we're going to chat through the yeses that got you to where you are today. But before that, how do you decide when to say no? And then can you share an example of a strategic no that you made along your career?
Oh man, there's been quite a few. I feel like I started my career and it was all about yes and just take every new opportunity. But you learn that you have to be pretty strategic just because of you're one person and you have to have different priorities at different parts of your life. I actually made a big no this week, or gave a big no this week. And it was one that if you were to have told me this, 5 years ago, even a year ago, whatnot, I would have been like, absolutely not. There's no way I would ever say no to that opportunity. But yeah, so it was for a CRO role. If anybody from Comply's on here, I was not looking, but it was just an opportunity that came up, and it was with folks that I love, who I've worked with before, and would be kind of an incredible opportunity. But for many reasons, it doesn't fit into where I am in my life right now. And so I've shared this with Katie and on a past panel. I lost my brother about 6 months ago to cancer. And for me right now, I had to look at what are my priorities. Is first my priority my career, or is my priority working through a grief process and being with the family and friends that I love and supporting myself in that way? And so even though it's really, really hard, because I've been so career driven my entire career, I had to ultimately decide, no, it's not the role. It's not the time for me. And for me, just being honest about that, to the person that had offered, to the CEO that had offered this, was perfect. And what I was also able to do is say, I'm not your person right now, but I know who might be, and able to introduce somebody who I've mentored throughout my career, a younger woman who's an executive who's amazing, and I have no doubt they'll be in amazing hands with her. So by turning down and saying no, it actually, I think, will open up a yes for someone else. And who knows, maybe I'll be lucky enough to work for her one day. So yeah, I think it's a little bit about a recent one.
Yeah, it's a great perspective too, and I think the question of what are my priorities right now, because those can shift with stuff that's going on externally from work too. So asking yourself that before making a decision is huge. Danielle, anything to add there?
Yeah, first of all, Erin, thank you for sharing and being vulnerable. Like, I think that's super
course.
important. And I would say, like, just building on that, I think there's like two layers. Like, if you're a leader listening or you run a team, it's like, what's being asked of my team and how do I diagnose that? How do I figure out if I say no to this, well, if I say yes to this, what else am I going to have to say no to? And kind of doing that trade-off analysis. But for myself, I always think about like, why me, why now? And just, I'm a big believer, Katie, you know this, and like experiences I want to have, and how did the decisions I make and choices I make align to my decisions? I mean, my experiences. Um, I guess a strategic no, just going the vulnerable route is I was on an upward trajectory at a company early on in my career. I was up for a promotion, running the New York City office, a very glamorous job, like big title. And it just so happened that as I was working towards this, I was very close. The owner of the company made a call that I unfortunately didn't have like the physical attributes that she was looking for in a leader. It was very shocking to hear that. And my boss at the time, I think, thought that he was going to motivate me and say, like, hey, this just means you'll have, you'll outwork them, you'll get it. And young me would have been like, yes, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep doing this. I got it. But I really sat with like, is this what I want? And that I left that job without having another one. And that was a strategic no, I'm not going to keep doing this. That now I have just a better idea of what I want and what yes is. So I don't know, that was kind of a strategic no that stands out to me.
And this may come up more in the conversation. The example you just gave is such a crazy situation that you
Crazy.
experienced.
Same.
But because of that, it did lead you to so many opportunities. And we'll get into that with this next question for you, where you said that you didn't actually get super intentional with your career until your time at WeWork, which was the role that you had before AlphaSense. And that was on the heels of that 5-year stint at Uline. What were the happy accidents that got you to WeWork? And then how did you reframe your mindset to shape what came next?
Yeah, I think happy accidents. So we're all conditioned to want the next thing, to want like more money, a bigger title, like something flashier. It's just human nature. And during that transition where I said, you know what, this isn't what I want. I don't want to work for a company that would ever say this to me. I don't want to work for a boss that would ever not understand or be empathetic or consider my feelings. And so I sat down and kind of started to make a really clear bullseye of what it is that I did want. And so as I stepped into my next role, I could interview in that way. But at that time, I think I had a lot of ambition and very little patience. So I started to really focus on like getting intentional about how I show up, what I want to do, how people will experience me. And I actually at WeWork took like steps back in my career to like take on a really nascent role that I wasn't really necessarily fully qualified to do at the time. And I would say like figuring out my yes zone and my bullseye just really helped me make the right decision to join that company at that time.
How did you go about figuring out that yes zone?
Yeah, so I started to think about, like I said, not title, not role, because that looks different at every company in every way. And instead, I started to think about like, what are the experiences I want to have? So, like, for example, I sat down, I said, I want to work internationally at some point, 2 years, 5 years. I want to run an international team, 2 years, 5 years. So like really starting to think, I want to be asked to help shape a board deck. I like, what are the actual like experiences that I want to have? So that way I know like every time an opportunity comes up, it either is going to help me with that, achieve those experiences, or it's not. Like I have a good example of one that like happened to me. So there's actually two. The first one is that is a real experience I wanted to have when I joined WeWork. I wanted to go international. I want to work international. So WeWork, good company, international footprint, fits the bill. Now it's like, how do I say yes to something that gets me closer? Well, I happened to be like in a room where people were talking about sending someone to China to open up the offices there. And they had asked me to help select someone to go. And instead of saying like, hey, John Smith would be great to go, I said, I want to go.
I
And
love
that's
that.
also hard. It's hard to say, I'm sure, like to throw your hat in the ring and be like, no, me. So I did that. I got that opportunity, which was amazing. And then the second one actually was at AlphaSense. I had an experience I really wanted of like I wanted to hire a peer. I don't think we get that experience that often of like I want to actually be the one to hire someone at my level. And so the head of sales development moved into another position, and in enablement, the CRO asked me, "Would you lead sales development?" And I was like, how does that even make any sense? Why would the head of enablement ever run sales development? But I went to my bullseye and I said, I want to hire someone at my level. This experience would give me that because I could hire I could hire the person to take over. So that's just another example of how I said yes to something that doesn't necessarily connect to my role, but it helps me with my experience.
I think those are great examples too, because you can, and we'll talk about this in a minute, you can kind of run into the, I'm going to raise my hand for these things. That's what everyone says to do. But then what if your plate gets so full that you're not actually doing the things that will propel you to the thing you want to do? So by having some of those goals in place of what you want to do, that can help you dictate what you say yes to or no to.
Absolutely.
So that's great. Aaron, early in your career, you pivoted from sports and entertainment management to marketing before landing in sales. And you've been used to new domains throughout your career, and you've used this to your advantage. What do you believe you've been most successful in because of what you didn't know?
Ooh, yeah. I think, man, as I get further and further in my career, this becomes harder and harder because obviously you're filling up so many experiences. So you know a little bit more,
Mm-hmm.
hopefully, as you're progressing. And it's so hard to replace that strength of not knowing, of getting to come into a situation with a blank slate without preconceived notions of how things should be. It's honestly something I struggle with today. Like my boss will often remind me, hold on, are you leaning on the way that it's been done, the way that you've done it before and seen it successful versus what we need to do because this is a new situation, new company, new team, etc. So yeah, I think actually the way I actually first jumped into sales, I was working as like a not it wasn't even an SDR. It was like pre SDR. Like it was the lowest on the totem pole of sales. And they had asked me to prep these like prep docs for the AEs. So I was doing a bunch of cold calling every day, making my 100 dials, and then would need to prep the AEs for their calls. And I was like, oh, well, I'll just make this prep doc in this way. And like I added like bios and pictures and was combing through their LinkedIn's or whatever at the time. And I did it in a way because I didn't know how you're supposed to do it. That was totally bizarre and like off the normal path. But then they loved it. And I got honestly promoted off just that. So sometimes by just not knowing how things are done, it gives you such a fresh perspective. And oftentimes in roles, as we get more comfortable with them, we'll either just land back on what we do know, or we'll start to overcomplicate the way things have been done. And sometimes by coming in without being an expert, you can kind of go back to what are the simple principles of what we need to accomplish? How do I go about accomplishing this goal in a way that's pretty straightforward? And usually that's actually much better. So yeah, I don't know if that's a little bit of a roundabout way of just saying, yeah, leverage your newness as a strength.
Can I build on that for a second?
Yeah.
Because I actually really, that hits home for me because I think sometimes what you're saying is someone will say, hey, I want you to take on this project, or I want you to try this thing, or can you do this thing? And they don't give you a whole lot of direction. And so maybe you'll ask like, oh, can you clarify a few things? And then it's kind of just like, I need it. You go away and try and do it. And then people overcomplicate how it should get done, and they get in their head, and there's all that head trash. Like, I think something that's helped me confident in my confidence too is just saying, if they didn't tell me exactly how to do it, then I'm just going to do the best that I can, the best that I know how, and they'll give me feedback. Like, what's the end? I feel like you were so brave in that moment just to be like, I'll just do it. And that like it opened up doors for you.
Absolutely. And I think we forget that even at expert levels of execution and whatnot, a lot of times no one has the right answer. And especially in a lot of the fields that we're working in, we're tackling really, really hard problems that the world hasn't seen. Like, using AI, for instance, the whole wave of this. At what point in human history have, humans had to grapple with some of the complex challenges we're working through now? There's not a playbook that's written. And so no one really knows the answer. And so being comfortable, being uncomfortable, and not having the answer is such a strength. It makes you just so much more resilient and flexible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've experienced that as well, and the overcomplicating it. And I've heard too, sometimes putting out your best 80% so that you can then workshop the 20% with other people who have different perspectives and viewpoints can be helpful as well. So really appreciate that. And we'll go to you, Danielle, for the start of this question. And then Aaron, I want your thoughts too. What are your non-negotiables when evaluating a new opportunity?
Non-negotiables. So I think for me, like, and it could be different levels, like career, project, like, I think I have to really clearly understand why this is being asked of me, or why this opportunity is coming my way, or why this would be beneficial to me. Like, there has to be some clear why that I can tether myself to. I have to, the impact of that has to be really clearly defined. I don't think I need like, oh, it's going to result in this specific metric, but I at least have to understand, like, by doing this, like, what's the so what? So what? And I think that has to be articulated to me. I also, a non-negotiable for me is like just understanding, like, maybe like what's the support that I'm going to have with this opportunity, or if I take on this project, like, am I alone? Because some people work really well in alone, settings by themselves, solo settings. Like, I'm not someone that does that. Like, I want to know like who's around me. And I think it just all goes back to Katie, like, me knowing what I want and what I don't want. And so non-negotiables are like, what's the why? What's my impact? And like, what's the support that I'm getting if I take this on, or if I tackle this?
Mm-hmm. Aaron, does any of that resonate with you?
Oh, absolutely. And I think something that Danielle's hitting on so clearly is knowing what you want. And I think this shifts a lot too, as you in your career. I was thinking today, and I was asking Katie kind of about what, where the audience is more or less in their careers. Are we earlier, or are we a little bit later? And since there's a mix, I was thinking about it on both sides. So in my 20s, the number one non-negotiable was breadth of experience. How could I see as many different experiences as possible in whichever role I took, or which roles would give me that breadth of experience? Pro tip: specialist sales can be a really good way to get this. So if you're in a large organization, oftentimes you'll have layers of sales specialists where they may have really domain specific experience in a certain product or solution. And then their job is half enabling other sellers who are just more general account executives. And then also working with those clients about those specific products or solutions. For me, that was a strategic yes I took at Google, because that allowed me to very quickly work across hundreds of deals instead of just working on 5 that I would have worked on as an account executive in one patch. For me, being able to have a wide breadth of experiences early in my career now gives me the confidence to be able to have really good gut intuition about certain situations, because I've at least at some point seen some variation of it oftentimes. So yeah, that was a big non-negotiable then. Now my non-negotiables look a little bit different. Pay is going to be one of them. So obviously it's got to makes sense financially. But I think even more than that, the mission. I just am not somebody that can self-motivate and sell something unless I'm really excited and inspired by it. I think too, sales is one of those areas where it's underrated in terms of social impact. Like no one ever thinks, I want to have social impact, so I'm going to go into sales. But in reality, I think it's actually an incredible way to have a really large amount of impact on the world. So if you look at us, like, how many hours do we work a week? Probably way too many. But if I'm to work in a career where I don't have impact, but I can, donate 10% of my, earnings each year or something, versus working in an area where I'm working towards a mission, I'm selling something that supports a mission that's helping other people. So for me, that's often been cybersecurity. I'm putting in, the more effort I put in, the smarter I work towards it, the more deals I get done, the more deals my team gets done, and the more this software goes to help protect people. You're then aligning your day-to-day core amount of time that you're spending on something that's going to have a large amount of impact. And for me, that's so satisfying and motivating. And on the days where, you can kind of quickly forget how much you negotiated and pay and whatever, that gets me out of bed more than just hard, straight numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I also think like another maybe non-negotiable, like learning something. I like always say, like when I'm evaluating a project or an initiative, like who can I learn from that maybe, again, it's like selfish. I think that's not a bad word. But as you're navigating your career and you're thinking about what's right for you, like it has to be selfish, right? It has to be about you because nobody cares more about you than you, right? So I think like can you learn something? And I love what you're saying. I think pay is oftentimes overlooked. And again, I think it's just being fairly paid for what it is you're being asked to do, and that needs to feel good, and or else you'll be resentful about any job or any opportunity you take.
Totally. I was going to add the people aspect, and then Katie, if it's okay if I get super tactical for a minute.
Please.
A lot of, honestly, there's so many startups that are popping up every single day right now. And so I feel like there's probably a lot of folks on the call who are maybe evaluating those different startup opportunities. My non-negotiables when it comes to that, I need to know that the founders or the CEOs, whoever at the top part of leadership, they're realistic about the outcome. Whenever I hear from a founder, my goal is to be the next Google, alarm bells go up. And I think, ooh, is this going to be somebody where we're actually, most companies aren't going to be the next Google. Can you still build a really successful company and have a great exit? Absolutely. But it's going to require setting aside your ego in some ways and being able to execute on whatever that, more like 3-5 year goal is. So that's one piece. And then runway, I always definitely make sure to check. I was coaching somebody last week where they were super excited about the opportunity. They asked, should I take it? And I was like, well, how much runway do they have? Does this company have? And they're like, ooh, let me go find out. They came back and they were like, yeah, they're underwater in 5 months. And I was like, ooh, probably not. Let's not take that one. Yeah. So just a couple tactical things. But yeah, like Danielle said too, the people. I've got to love who I'm working with and be inspired and just know that at the end of the day, they're good people.
Mm-hmm. And Erin, you bring up a good point for those that are potentially evaluating a new opportunity outside of their company and looking for a new role or plan to be soon. Along the lines of the people and leadership that you shared, Erin, Danielle, you also shared about your experience interviewing, I believe at AlphaSense, where if you want to talk to someone that's not necessarily in the docket of interviewees, you can ask for that.
Yeah. Yeah, like again, knowing what you want, what you don't want, I'm sure everyone on the line has watched or heard of the WeWork story. I lived through it. So that's, time for another chat. But I knew from that experience, like I really wanted to work for a founder and a CEO that was very calculated, that had a very clear vision. I had a lot of trauma from like all of these acquisitions that I worked through, which is anyone knows an acquisition's a lot of energy, it's a lot of work. That just didn't make strategic sense. So during my interview process at AlphaSense, I was really bullish on the company, being, generative AI native and like seeing everything that we were building. I really wanted to make sure that the CEO and founder was going to be like, his vision was clear and that we were on that path. And so I did ask to make sure that I spoke with him during the process, and incorporate him into my interview. That was really important to me.
Mm-hmm. Ask for those things. Even before you're hired, you can be advocating for yourself and what's important.
Definitely.
So that's great. Danielle, to stick with you, you do a lot of skill and behavior coaching. What advice do you find yourself giving most often as it relates to professional development and career exploration?
Oh, that's such a good one. There's a couple. So first, I always, even on day one of new hire onboarding at AlphaSense, I always share with folks like you can build your brand by default or by design, meaning that like those around you are either gonna, build a brand for you, or everyone has a reputation, like you're gonna have one whether or not you want it or not. And so you need to be really, again, intentional about how people experience you. Small little things are really important. So that's oftentimes like coaching advice that I give folks in their career is like, what is your personal brand? How do you want people to experience you? And what are the very small, tiny things that you can be doing day in and day out that create that reality? So that's one thing. The other thing that I oftentimes help people with in their career is getting comfortable having more difficult conversations, whether that's managing up or sideways or, to someone that is your peer, etc. So being really comfortable with sharing how things make you feel or how you were impacted by something, whether or not that person, did that in a way that made good sense or not. Like, how do you actually express how that's impacting you? And I do that a lot with people because I think that's one of the blockers to helping you get to your next opportunity or helping you acquire more experience is being very clear with how you're communicating and being able to give feedback in a way that lands and moves you forward. So those are like the two things I would say. There's a lot more, but.
Mm-hmm. What is your personal philosophy on giving feedback?
Yes, I have my own methodology. It's called BEEP. So it stands for behavior, effect, or outcome, expectation, and positive suggestion. So the kind of tip here is the first one is like you never want to say to someone like, you said this thing, or and I use this at home. Like if I'm with my husband and he, leaves a dish out or whatever, like you left the dishes out, like automatically people are like, whoa, like, guards up, friction's high. Instead, like divorcing the person from like the behavior of like, hey, listen, like when you're eating lunch and the dish is left on the counter, that kind of again just like lowers the guards, like that's the behavior. And then it's like the impact or effect or outcome is like that, creates mess in the kitchen. It's giving me anxiety. I am like coming into the kitchen. It's not a conducive environment for me. And this is how it's impacting me. I know it's not your intention, but like, here's how that's impacting me. And then having a conversation, like, can you help me understand like why that's happening? What's going on? Listen, the expectation is that you and I are cleaning the kitchen, we're putting things away. Like, can we get in a better habit together? What do you need help with? How can I help you? So again, that's a very extreme example, but just kind of walking through that with you.
Very timely, because I know when I walk out of this office, there will be dishes that have just spontaneously
I want to give a
appeared.
disclaimer. Mike, my husband, does not leave dishes out. So
because of the
Good
great
for him.
feedback you've given him.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Did you have anything to add to that, Erin, before I move
No,
on?
no, I was
Okay,
honest, I was
cut
taking
you
notes.
off.
No, I was taking notes. So
Perfect. We'll send out some
Really good.
takeaways tomorrow too. So everyone who is also taking notes, you'll get a refresher. Erin, you initially had the mindset of outworking everyone, and you shared that a little bit earlier as well. Why and how did you shift from working smarter and more strategically versus harder?
yeah. So because I had a really non-traditional background. Like, I mean, again, studying sports and entertainment is not exactly the standard path into Google, especially in like a technical aspect of it of security. So in the beginning, I did just have to outwork until I was able to get the confidence and experience to then start to work in a just more intelligent way. For me, it's so critical because you're not always going to be able to work incredibly hard. I look at, this, I mentioned the season of life I'm in right now where navigating a lot of grief, I can't work at the rate at which I usually am. Like, my output right now is not at what it normally is, but I know that if I can make the key decisions that I need to in a really strategic and smart way for our organization within the company, then it really cuts down on the amount of work. So, and I don't think it's something where like you have to get it right all the time. And a lot of times when I'm looking at a large amount of work that my team's doing or I'm doing, I'm like, hold on, let's figure out, is there a decision we can make in how we streamline this or how we in resource this or et cetera, that could take a lot of this work away. But yeah, it's interesting. I remember a mentor of mine who was hiring, he was a CRO at a company, and I had referred somebody in, and he interviews them and he goes to give me feedback afterwards. And he was like, that guy is probably the hardest worker I'll ever come across in my career. And also the most driven. If I told him, go run through that brick wall, I know he would do it. And I go, you're right. Like, aren't you happy I referred him? Like, I was expecting a gold star. And he goes, no, I'm not going to hire him. He goes, because that would be a dumb decision for him to go run through a brick wall. Like, that would be stupid. I don't want him to do that. I need him to know, or I need somebody in this role that knows, when does it make sense to put everything we have behind this and spend all of our time on it and work really hard on it versus no, be strategic and work in a smarter way. So a bit rambly, but it's kind of my thoughts on that piece.
Well, along those lines, I think for many of us, women especially, it can be easy to be like, okay, I'll add that to my plate, I'll outwork everyone. Is there a way in which you retrain your mind to think more strategically and to really zero in on, this is the highest priority, or this makes the most sense right now, and these are the things I can let fall? Or did it just come with time?
I had to be very realistic with myself, where there have been multiple roles where I've even told my team, look, if 30% of the people that you're working with aren't pissed at you today, then maybe you're not prioritizing hard enough. And those were pretty extreme examples where I was running a team that had to work with so many different stakeholders across so many different companies and logos or whatnot. It just wasn't possible. And so, I had hired amazing people who wanted to always say yes to everybody. But very quickly I saw they're going to get completely burned out. So I had to get them really comfortable and myself comfortable with the fact of, I can't make everybody happy. I have to be ruthless in my prioritization, because otherwise I'm not going to have high performance. And that's ultimately going to have a negative impact on the company. So yeah, there's been times it's an extreme way of saying it. And no, I don't think literally 30% of people are angry at them each day, but it's an extreme piece of feedback I've given that it just helps them reset, that says, okay, wait, it's okay for people to be upset, because ultimately when they're asking me for something, it's for their specific need, and that might not align with what's best for our team, what's best for our company, et cetera. So just getting comfortable with the fact that not everybody, I often say, I'm not on that person's Christmas card list this year, and that's okay.
Well, I think that's modeling by example too. You're giving your team permission that it's okay to prioritize, and that may mean not everyone is happy all of the time. But I think that to hear that from you and seeing you model that is so important, especially as it pertains to burnout and piling things on your plate, which is a big topic these days. So this question is for both of you. Danielle, I'll go to you next. And by the way, this was submitted, so if anyone has any questions, now are the time to drop it in at the bottom of your screen in the Q&A box. This is one that came in during the registration. And so as it pertains to people interviewing, someone asked, how do you recommend people speak to their experience if they're applying to a role they haven't technically done before? And I think this can go internal for a promotion or just to gain more experience in another side of the business, as well as externally for a new role.
Yes, I think that, I think we talked about this. Like, I went through this program a long time ago, actually, my company and at the time invested in me to go through it. It's called, I think it's like Women's Accelerator. And there was a stat that we like worked through, which was like women say yes 50% of like when they're 100% ready, and men say yes when they're 50% ready. And I thought that was like so, it just stuck with me. Like, really?
Don't you see it too when you're interviewing? Like I see this all the time.
Yeah.
with
Like,
candidates.
I'm like, oh my God, that's crazy. Like, I started to really think, like, is that true? And it really is true. Like, there's something that, like, it's like we don't think we're qualified for it, like, until we know we've done it before, right? But like, that's not realistic. Like, you're always going to be in a role where you're doing something new for the first time, whether that's the context of the stage the company's in or the project. You're always going to be new, so you have to get comfortable with it. So I think advice for someone that's interviewing for a job that they like never done before is like, A, think about the experiences you had and how, again, I'm really big on experiences, not titles. Like, how do you draw the correlation? Like, what are the skills of this role? What are the responsibilities of this role? And how do you draw that correlation of like, hey, and being upfront, I may not have done these specific things, but let me tell you how this experience correlates or translates to being able to have the confidence and the capability in doing these things and being able to tell that story really clearly. I think storytelling is oftentimes really overlooked, and connecting your experience rather than sitting there and being like, I haven't had this title, I haven't had this role. Because again, realistically, if you want to do anything new, you're never going to have done it before.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, Aaron, if that's like something if you have to build upon that too, but.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. I think looking at, if you even take the resume or the JD of the job and look at it and say, okay, it wants me to have done this. What are the attributes of somebody who has done that? So if the attributes are they've been really flexible or they are able to handle rejection, like if you think about high volume sales, like you're going to need somebody that can bounce back from a no pretty quickly. And so if you think about, again, those underlying attributes and you can tell stories about, you might not have done it, but you do have the attributes for what it's going to take to be able to do that. I think that's really important. I think about the best sales ops leader I've ever worked with for like myself, like supporting myself. And she was somebody who I hired. She was working as a sales associate at Nordstrom Rack, just in a regular day-to-day retail store. And then she was working as a door-to-door salesperson for Google Fiber. And based on just the fact that I knew she was hardworking, I knew that she could handle no, I knew that she had seen a lot of complex situations in terms of unhappy customers, unhappy situations, and had the ability to not get overwhelmed by that. I hired her as like a junior sales ops person, and she grew to being a leader of multiple teams for me. And I would hire any day of the week moving forward. But yeah, just one example, she had never worked in SaaS, but I knew that she had the underlying attributes that would make her so valuable. And I was also willing, and I think remember too, that when leaders are hiring, it's not like they're expecting you from day one to be an expert in a lot of roles.
Mm-hmm.
So they're willing for the right hire, somebody that ultimately has the attributes they need, to give them some time to get the domain expertise. That's fine. I'm willing to make that investment because ultimately I would rather have somebody with strong underlying attributes without the skill set than somebody with the skill set, but without great attributes under it, because I know that's going to be likely somebody that'll just fade away pretty quickly.
Yeah, like I think about it as like capability and ability. And like the ability is like you've done it, like I can do it. The capability is like, are you able to do it through investment? Like can you invest in the development of to be able to do this thing at the highest quality? And I think if you can demonstrate that I'm capable of this, I think that's like what you're saying, Aaron, is like how do you demonstrate you're capable of this thing?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And I would be curious quickly, because we do have a couple questions that have come in. That person you were speaking to, Erin, specifically that you hired that didn't have the experience, did they do anything in the interview process that helped connect those dots for you as the manager and interviewer that they could do that? Or do you think it was more on you that you actually took the second level glance to really make it a point to see?
To be honest, I I think this is probably true in a lot of these situations when you're applying to something where you don't have necessarily the expertise, it's going to depend on your reputation. Because as a leader, I'm not going to hire, if somebody's not an expert in it, I'm willing to hire them, but I'm not willing to hire them unless I'm able to talk to somebody who has worked with them and can confirm this is the right bet that I can make. Because it's a bit of a bet when you're, hiring somebody who isn't matches 100% of what you're asking and saying that you need. So back to Danielle's point earlier about your brand and how important that is, I was able to connect with one of her previous managers who said, look, she is diamond in rough. Like, you have to hire her, go forward. And so, yeah, it wasn't anything she directly did, but it was her brand that she had clearly invested in. And that's something that you need to invest in no matter if you are 2 days out of college or, 20 years into your career. It's just so critical.
Yeah. It also speaks to listing the right references if
Yes.
because they are going to get reached out to, and back channeling is becoming more of a thing too, where someone can reach out to previous employers that you maybe not listed as a reference. So building that brand to have to fall back on is huge. And along this line, one of the questions submitted is about building your brand. So at what point did you feel comfortable being quote unquote selfish or asking, how does this benefit me? How did you cope with the fear of it damaging your brand or potentially losing opportunities in the future as a result if someone mistook some of that? Whoever has a thought first.
Yeah, I can answer. Like, actually, I'm like obsessed. I mean, my team will tell you if anyone's on here, AlphaSense people, like, I genuinely at my core, like, feedback's a gift. And I think you give it to people you care about. And I actually, starting at AlphaSense, I asked for feedback from my boss, who's the CRO, and he said, he'll tell you this. He said, "Oh, I think you really are such a nurturing person, and you really are very warm, and you can get people to open up. But I think you're too warm, and therefore, like, not sure that you really can lead the team, like, demand things from them. Like, I'm just not really sure that I see that in you." And I knew, like, at my core, like, I am warm, I'm demanding, I have a very high bar of excellence. Like, why wasn't he seeing this in me yet? And it was really because I was not focused intentionally on my brand. I wasn't focused intentionally on how people see me in different scenarios. So actually, it was 5 years ago when I got that feedback. I was like, very much like, I am going to make sure, like, I'm very clear about what I want, who I am, how I show up. So I think that's when I made, like, the intentional decision. And I think you have to do it in a tact. You have to have tact. You have to have grace. You have to learn how to frame things the right way. Like, framing and communication is key. Like, the way you say things, how you articulate them, it can be something as different as, like, I want this thing, to here's why I want to share with you. I'm the best person for this experience. I'm the best person for this job. Those two things sound very different. So to me, it's all about framing and communication.
Yeah, I would add on the brand aspect. I just remember this. I'd forgotten I had done this early in my career. When I was at Google, I remember there was somebody who was a colleague of mine. She was also a friend of mine, but I took her aside and I was like, look, I need a brand manager. Can we be each other's brand managers? And by that, let's make a pact right now that no matter how bad it is, no matter if it's going to hurt our feelings, no matter what, we will be honest with each other and let each other know what our brand is. And you may think your brand is something, but you may not realize how you're being received. And so there were a couple of times where she came and told me, and we had coffee, and she'd be like, look, as your brand manager, just know this is your reputation based on XYZ. And I just need you to know that. And it was so helpful. And it was something where, because we had that upfront conversation about it of, hey, this might sound brutal at times, but we're going to give each other that feedback. I think I received it in probably a better light than I might have just raw without that conversation. I think too, the other thing to think about when people are trying to sway you from one opportunity to the other, ultimately you do have to think about yourself, because ultimately that's who's going to live with the consequences, who's going to, only you are living your day to day, right? But just know there's usually an underlying motivation that person's pushing you in one way or the other. And if you have a genuinely good reason for not accepting something, an opportunity they've offered or something like that, and they hold that against you, it's probably not somebody you wanted to work for anyway. It's probably not a situation or type person that you should be running towards. And so I think it just goes back to knowing what you want, being clear, and knowing that everybody's ultimately putting themselves first in these. And that's important to do because you have a lot of other folks that rely on you. And yeah, you got to do what's best for you. And that's not personal. It's just kind of the way things are. And if somebody's really offended by that, then probably don't want to associate with them anyway.
Yeah, great tips. One other question that came in is around promotion conversations and navigating that internally. Any tips for, it's kind of an extension of what y'all are saying with your personal brand, but advocating for yourself in a promotion conversation?
I mean, I think I would be curious what Aaron has to say too, but I think if you're looking to progress in your career and you're aiming for a promotion, like you have to very clearly understand what is expected of you, what you need to demonstrate in order to earn that promotion. I don't think anyone is deserving. I think people earn things, and that's through the work that you do. So if your boss or your company doesn't have very clear competencies in place of like, these are the very specific things that you need to demonstrate, I would get those in place immediately, because again, it comes back to like the facts. Like, I'm not going to stand in front of you and say, Katie, please, I need to get promoted. I've been working here for 2 years. The tenure thing drives me nuts. Like, I've been here for 2 years. I need a promotion. Like, that's not how it works. Like, you have to earn it. So what have you done? So I think being able to say, Katie, I understand that these are the things that are required of me to demonstrate to move to the next level. Can I share with you what I've been doing? What else do you need to see from me? You have to manage the expectations around it, because when you're early in your career, I told you I was ambitious and not patient. You are going to get this like feeling inside of you of resentment, and that is no place to be. You should really love what you do and love where you work and understand the things you're doing are moving you forward. So that's my spiel there. But Aaron, I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, I have two pieces that come to mind on this, and they're not necessarily related, or they probably honestly contradict each other in some ways. But one, I would say, be bold, like, and declare, like, let your manager know, hey, this is what I'm working towards. I know that I might not be there yet, but like, I want to be promoted. So it can sometimes, it sounds terrible, but it's just the fact of life. Sometimes squeaky wheel gets the oil, whatever. If somebody feels comfortable not in it being promoted, they're in their current role, it's like whatever, they're not pushing for that, well then that might be okay. It might be okay leaving them right there. So one, advocate for yourself, let your manager know, let your leader know that this is what you're trying to achieve. And then two, be bold. So there's been times where I was not on the promo list and I said, hey, this one kind of still makes me blush to today, where I was like, look, if I land this massive deal that I'm working on that's in a quarter, will you promote me? And like my manager kind of looked at me and he goes, yeah, there's no way, that deal, no way in hell that's going to close. So yeah, I'll promote you if you land that deal. And then we landed it. And I was like, all right, that's my promotion. And I got the promotion. So you can be bold in those and know that too, you can push and negotiate for a lot of that. But then also stop obsessing about it. Because especially earlier in your career, I've seen so many people derail themselves because they didn't get a promo when they thought they should have. And it completely wrecks them for the next 6 months. Then their performance does sink. And it's one of those things where I've seen plenty of times where they were on the path. It just needed one more cycle, needed one more review, et cetera. And they would have gotten it, but they freak out so much because they're so obsessed with level, title, et cetera, when they should be obsessed with what are the skills I'm gaining. Yeah, no, like I have no idea when I went from a level 5 to level 6 at Google, like I don't remember that, but at the time it probably felt like life or death, but it's not. You just take a bigger picture at those levels earlier on in your career.
The one thing you said, like the squeaky wheel, I think like if I could even just like reframe that for myself, it's like nobody knows that some people have this thing in their head where they're like, I'm going to work harder than anyone else and people will notice me. I'll just get the thing because I'm doing the thing and I'm heads down and I'm working hard and they'll see me. They have to see me. But as you work in an organization that gets bigger, like no one's a mind reader. So I think what you're saying is like make your intentions known and make what you want known, because only you know them. And if you don't say them, how is someone going to know?
Exactly. And then when you get the rejection, lean into it. Like I remember bad feedback on one performance review from our ops leader at one point. And I went to him later. I was pissed because I didn't think it was good feedback. I kind of disagreed with a lot of it, but I was like, you know what? He was the one person that gave me bad feedback on this. So I'm going to go. And so for my next promo packet, I'm going to get a glowing review out of this guy. And so I went to him and I said, look, this is where you think I'm lacking. Guess what? I want you to help me and be my coach on these areas where you think I messed up. Now, will you sponsor me on this plan that I've created where I'm going to improve in this area? So suddenly his name was attached to it and attached to my success. And so if I didn't get it, then he must be a bad coach. So he felt more invested. And sure enough, that next promo cycle, I got it. And the big piece that helped me was the fact that the person could attest to, hey, clearly I'm being honest because I was honest about her performance in the beginning. And two, she's grown. She's willing to invest in these areas and bounce back from that initial rejection.
I love that.
I am curious, being nosy over here, given that you felt you disagreed with that feedback, after working with him maybe more hands-on, did you come to realize maybe what his feedback was, or did you still feel like you were having to fight for that the whole time?
I grew so much by partnering with him and working with him on it. I will say the things that he thought I lacked in, I don't think I lacked in them, but I think I lacked in the ability to demonstrate them. So I think I was doing the underlying skill correctly, but I wasn't communicating that out. And that's a really important part of it.
Yeah.
Back to what Danielle said, like if you can't demonstrate it in a way that is tuned to your audience that's making the decisions about your promos, then that's a skill in and of itself that's important for somebody that's progressing. And so he helped me tailor that. And outside of that, I also got a lot of skills from him that I didn't even think I needed to concentrate on that were helpful.
Yeah. That's great. Okay, last question submitted here before we wrap up today. And this is a great tie-in because both AlphaSense and ComplyAdvantage are hiring. So if you're interested in applying to work with these amazing women, you can go to our website. We'll also have a link following that will have links out to their career pages and all of that. You can let them know why I sent you and get to the top of the stack. But wanted to let you know this last question. When you're looking to hire people for your teams, what are the key characteristics you're looking for in the candidate?
I can go first. One, is this somebody that's going to add to the culture of my team? And are we going to enjoy being around them? So honestly, like we work way too much to not enjoy being around our colleagues. So first off, is this someone, I think companies will call it like the airplane test. Like, is this somebody, if I was sitting next to on an airplane, I'd be happy about it? Or am I going to be like, ugh, their attitude is just so negative and they're just so whatever that it's going to be a miserable flight. So I think that's one of the first things. And then it goes down to attributes. Again, it's not necessarily the experience and the skill set. It is more around, are they going to be coachable? Are they going to be willing to handle and be flexible and handle a lot of things that might not be in scope? That are they going to be able to handle ambiguity? You know, especially when you're at the scale up stage or startups, you're going to get thrown stuff like that. It's not in your job description. Like I was handling a billing inquiry and emergency yesterday. I'm not an accountant, but that's what I need. That's what the situation called for. So are they going to be somebody that's flexible, somebody that's just good natured, good to be around? And then are they somebody that is going to invest in others as well? So I'll often ask, no matter how senior or junior somebody is, I'll ask them, tell me about a time recently where somebody that you've coached and helped has gotten a big win. And what I'm looking for in that answer is, do they light up talking about another person and their success? And can they give an example, especially junior folks, of helping others and reaching out, or are they just concentrated on themselves? Danielle, what do you think?
I love that. So my team's motto is nothing's ours, nothing's precious, nothing's perfect. So like during the interview process, I'd really try and test for those three things, like nothing's ours. So to your point, do they talk about their impact on others? Do they use the words we? Do they give examples? nothing's perfect. I really love I like how you your example was like, what have you helped others with? I also like to ask, like, what have you asked for like how have you
Yeah.
asked for help recently? I like people that can demonstrate vulnerability, and asking for help is really important. And then like nothing's precious, to your point about the ambiguity and the scale up nature of companies that we work at. Like, can you throw things away? Can you iterate? What you did yesterday isn't going to work tomorrow? Like, are you devastated when someone says this is not good anymore? Because
Right.
again, it's not personal. And I think those are the things I look for.
I absolutely agree. Couldn't have said it better.
All fantastic examples. Well, thank you so much. We're almost at the hour, so we'll let everyone get back to their days. Thank you again for spending time with us and sharing your perspectives. Like I said, I'll send a takeaway email tomorrow that will include both Danielle and Aaron's LinkedIns, so you can follow them there. And just so everyone knows, our next virtual event is going to be May 21st, and we're going to be discussing how to be an inclusive leader while building high-performing teams. We could probably just extend this panel today and hear from these two amazing leaders on that topic as well, but we will have two other leaders as well join. So thank you so much. Y'all have a great rest of the day, and we'll be in touch soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.